Sheriff Bradshaw, how are you today?
I'm good, good.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for allowing Tammy and I to sit down and have a candid conversation with you. We realize that since the civil unrest, of George Floyd, we have had serious conversations as it relates to policing in America. And so we wanted to hone in on Palm Beach County, right? I have the distinct pleasure, Tammy, of having the services of the Sheriff Department, PBSO, out here in Westlake. And you do a phenomenal job for our city, and so we thank you and your officers for everything you do. But we do want to have a conversation today with Sheriff Bradshaw and just get some honest, candid answers. We are dealing with now, I think it's fair to say, we're dealing with some inequities and biases as it relates. So we want to be able to hear from you personally, so we could just clear some things up, put things out there, and see how will we move forward here in Palm Beach County. And so we're going to go ahead, I think, and get into our questions. Tammy, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Yeah,
Okay,
and I appreciate you having me here.
Yes, sir.
Just for the camera, we're social distancing, so we don't have a mask.
That's right.
I don't want to get in trouble since we're trying to enforce those things.
That's right.
But it's good to have these kind of conversations, and I wanted to videotape it so we could get it out.
Sure.
Because the more conversations that we have and the more questions that we raise, the more information we can get out there that's the right information. And I'm glad that you said candid conversation, because everything that I'm going to tell you, you may not like the answer,
Sure.
but I can assure you that it is factual. It will be the truth.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's good for us to hear things maybe we don't agree with.
Absolutely.
But it's a fact, and then maybe that fact is something that we need to work on.
Absolutely.
Right? But I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear.
Okay. Understood.
Okay.
Understood. And so I'm one I just talked about the other day. It's okay to agree to disagree.
Yeah.
Right? It's okay to agree to disagree and hear all viewpoints. And so that's what we want to be able to do today, and give everyone an opportunity to be able to do that. So let's get into our first question.
Sure. Yeah.
Talking about disparities and equity and equality, would you say, this is our first question, would you say that there's a disparity in race, even female leadership in corrections versus law enforcement? I know I, for one, I'm big on women in leadership. And I kind of looked at your website and, maybe asked around a little bit. So I want you to talk about race as well as it relates to female leadership within the Sheriff Department. So kind of two-part question. Would you say there's a disparity in race and female leadership in corrections versus law enforcement?
Well, I guess the answer to that's yes and no. And the yes part about it is that when I saw that question, I actually had the HR department just give me a breakdown of the entire agency, because I wanted to see not only about corrections and law enforcement, but the entire agency. Overall in the entire agency, we're not bad off. We could be better. It's a close split. It's 45 and some change percent minorities and 54% white, male and female. So it's close. We can work on that. When it comes to the civilians, it's pretty close into that number too. When you get to corrections versus law enforcement, it was very interesting, because I really did not see that particular disparity, and it's quite staggering. It really is. You have 81% minority and 18% white male and female. Wow. So the vast majority of the people that work over there are minorities. When I say minorities, I'm talking Black, Hispanic, Asian, and the whole thing. In law enforcement, it was, it's not the numbers that large, but it's about 66, 67% white, and minorities are 30%. Now, somebody would say to you, well, your minority community is 30% anyhow. I don't really care about those numbers. I think that the 32% is a little low. Okay. And I don't know why people gravitate to the corrections like they do. I asked a few people about it, and they said, well, look, your agency is one of the few agencies that pay the same for corrections as they do for law enforcement. A lot of the sheriff's office corrections officers make quite less.
Wow. Okay, so they get the same
They're
pay.
parity.
Okay.
Exactly the same.
Okay.
So when you're working in corrections, you're not out here answering calls for service, you're not getting shot at, you know, you're not out here in the weather. So, I mean, there's some advantages to that. Now, I'm not saying that's the whole thing, because corrections is a tough job on its own.
Yes.
I mean, you gotta have a lot of skills in corrections that law enforcement officers need,
Sure.
but don't use as much. And that's
Sure.
interpersonal skills, because you don't have a gun when you're in there,
Sure.
and you need to be able to talk to people. Now, because there's a larger pool of minorities, I have more supervisors that are minorities, and I have a significant amount of women in corrections that have supervisory positions,
Okay.
more than law enforcement.
Okay.
The path, I mean, trying to recruit women for law enforcement is tough,
Okay.
because they want to start families, and once they start the families, they don't like shift work. I think a lot of times they get into the job, they don't realize exactly how volatile and how busy the sheriff's office is, because they watch TV, or they think it's a matter of just handling calls for service and writing reports. And when they realize that this is a pretty tough job out here, they kind of get disillusioned. So the recruitment for females is tough. It really is.
Yeah.
So you have a smaller pool to move ahead. Now, the nature of the promotional system in the sheriff's office changed dramatically when I got there. For a long time, the sheriff could just go, you're a captain, you're a sergeant, you're whatever, right? Which led to a very good old boy system, who you were in favor with at the time. They just started a little bit of a promotional system when I got there, but we've enhanced it since then. So it's very competitive from deputy through the ranks of lieutenant. You do the best on the test, you do the best on the oral interviews, you do the best on the assessment centers. If you come out number one, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter who you know, you will get promoted. So getting up to that level is competitive with everybody that's in there. It's a large pool of people. Now the pool for deputy to sergeant's big. It's a smaller pool from sergeant to lieutenant. Then from captain on up, it's appointments by the sheriff, but it's not me singularly. I will talk to my staff and say, who is it that you think has been a good lieutenant? You know, what have they demonstrated? But to make captain or above, the educational requirements put the brakes on people, because I have mandated that if you're going to be a captain or above, you're going to have a master's degree. Right? So, and it's not that it puts the brakes on them because of they can't afford it, because we will pay for your education all the way up to a PhD.
Wow.
So the excuse of is I can't afford it is not there. So if you don't go get it, it's because you're lazy. And if you don't go get it, then don't expect to move up. So even when you get to the captain's level and you want to go to major or above, then the competition gets really fierce, because I've got people in the major levels that want to move up that have got law degrees, they got PhDs. So it's when you start talking about, I want to get a certain amount of people of color into the upper echelons, it's a very, very competitive area to get into. And then when you retire, like we had one of my department directors, Jim Davis, an African-American man, retired, right? So to look around for somebody else to fill his shoes that had a master's degree, had a CPA degree, and those type of things, the pool was very small.
Well, speaking of that, let's have a conversation about succession.
Yes.
They're retiring, they're leaving the workforce. What is the succession plan to make certain that there is no lapse of service as it relates to sheriff's office and the community?
And that is why we started paying for people's education, and that's why we start identifying people early on in their career when they get up to the captain, major, colonel levels, to start bringing them along to say, when this person retires, there's somebody else to step in there. Because we've had a significant amount of retirements in the 16 years that I've been there, and we've been able to move people into those positions with seamless.
Wow.
Another question that I have is I've always been a proponent and I've spoken openly about our law enforcement needs to look like the community that it's servicing.
Absolutely.
We've done a great job in Belglade with
Uh-huh.
that, so I want to thank you personally for that.
Yeah.
But how do we get to that in all of our locations throughout the county as it relates to the law enforcement staff on the ground looking like the community that they're working in?
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. It's like in Lake Worth, we have a significant Haitian population. Very tough to recruit Haitians for law enforcement.
And why do you think that is?
I just think that they have a tough time going back into their community, right? They feel looked down upon for some reason in their community. And guess what, folks? It's going to get even harder now. With the sentiment that's out there against law enforcement, the recruiting is going to be very, very tough, right? So yeah, we're very cognizant of that. Before the, I wish I'd have brought it with me. Before the COVID hit, we were recruiting throughout the state, the universities, the local colleges, you know, trying to start programs at the schools. We have a cadet program at John I. Leonard. You know, just getting into places that we could get into, business schools, and tell people, look, this is a good job, right? But the stigma that's being placed on law enforcement, you know, even a little bit before what has happened, is even worse now.
Sure.
I mean, you're going to find the applicant pool is going to go way down, right?
That was a good question, Tammy.
Yeah.
Speaking to that and being totally transparent, we've been seeing on the news lately police officers talking inappropriately to citizens. Why do you think, in your opinion, because I know you've been doing this for
50 years.
50 years. Wow, 50 years. Longer than I've been living, right? But being totally transparent, why do you think deputies are yelling and cursing at citizens, knowing that, truthfully, this only escalates opposed to de-escalating those situations?
Yeah, and it's not as rampant as you might think it is. You know, these are isolated incidents. Let's just take the one from the Wellington Mall area. The deputy actually did everything he was supposed to. As far as going there, the complaint, the people were making the disturbance, making the threats, the people that owned the business wanted them out of there, they refused to go, got arrested for trespassing. Everything was going good until he let the individual get under his skin. Once he let that individual push him to the point that he lost his composure, he let his mouth overload what he was doing. That's a problem, right? That's why we immediately took action, took him off the street, take him out of the system until we're going to deal with that. What we're going to deal with is his verbal problem. Now, the mechanics of the arrest, you know, he didn't physically harm anybody. It's just that that's inappropriate language. There's no reason for that. There's no call for that. You have the upper hand. Now, why does that happen? Unfortunately, the law enforcement people are not robots. There's no difference between you and me.
Sure.
You don't know when I came to work that day, if I had a bad day at home, if the wife's giving me problems, if I didn't feel good, if I got money problems, whatever it is. And I'm watching all the stuff going on TV about people against law enforcement and all that. Some people internalize that and don't know how to deal with it. And I think that they take out their frustrations. There's no doubt in my mind that this deputy, if he had it to do over again, would have not said anything. He would have just said, fine, I know what your rights are, you're going to get in the car, right? But didn't go like that. So now, because of that, he's going to face some discipline. He's going to take some classes on anger management, without a doubt, because that's all it is. It's a burst of anger, right? And he's going to take anger management classes, and you know, if it happens again, it's going to get even worse for him. What we did also is, at lineup training, make sure people saw what happened to other deputies and say, look, he just turned a very good result of an arrest into a problem in 13 seconds. Because nobody saw the 2 or 3 minutes ahead of time.
Right.
All they saw was the 13 seconds. Right? So that's the problem. But again, I go back to, they're human beings.
Sure.
They got all kinds of problems. And when you internalize what's going on nationally and you make it your problem, and who knows what's going on in their personal lives. Some people don't know how to deal with that, right? And I think that's what it's all about. And fortunately for us, it's not rampant.
Sure.
We have, look, we made 17,000 arrests last year, 17,000.
Wow.
Less than 3.5% of those used any force at all, any.
Wow.
And when I say any force, just because I grab you and bring you to the car, right? Or I have to forcibly put handcuffs behind you, or I have to push you down to do something. Because guess what? Most people, when they get arrested, just don't throw up their hands and jump in the car.
Sure.
Right? Oh, less than 3.5% of that was any force, and only half of the 3.5% was any type of really more than just minor force.
Okay.
Sure.
That's pretty incredible out of 17,000 arrests. So it's not like there's a lot of excessive force and manhandling going on out here.
Right.
Right? When you see bad things that are on these videos, most of it's an attitude, most of it's a demeanor type of thing, rather than just staying professional.
Sure. Sure.
Quick question with that. I want to kind of continue right there, and then Tim, I'm gonna let you ask your question, because I know as an administrator in education, you know, you train your teachers and you tell them, hey, listen, you can't do that. So when you are self-reflecting as the leader, when you see this, what are you saying to yourself? Are you beating yourself up, saying, could I have done something different? Is there a conversation that I could have said to my executive team? Because I'm sure you and your executive team are making these decisions, but is there something that you're internalizing and saying during this time,
Yeah.
what in the heck is going on? How am I going to be looked at as a leader of this agency? What are you, put me inside of you.
You don't want to be inside of me.
Well, give me a little bit of you.
Actually, you know, I don't beat myself up that much because I realize that we have a very good organization.
Okay,
When you have 4,300 people, you're like a city.
sure.
There's not 4,300 people in Westlake,
Right,
right? So you have your own city. And when you have your own city, you have people that have problems every single day. I don't care how many policies you write. I don't care how much training you do. I don't care how many procedures you put out there. You cannot fix stupid. Okay? And that's what that deputy did. He did something inappropriate and stupid at the spare of the moment, right? So I don't sit there and say, well, you know what? We haven't done anything the right way. We haven't done this. Because I know what goes on with the sergeants and lieutenants out here. I know they go to lineups and they tell these guys, you need to do this, this, and this. You need to be cognizant of who's watching you. You need to treat people the way they need to be treated. So we're making all the right moves. We're taking all the right steps. We've got all the right policies and procedures. But these human beings that work out here are going to make mistakes. And I got 4,300 chances every day. And I hate to say this, but probably right this minute, one of them is doing something I don't want them to do.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're like a little city,
Sure,
you know?
sure.
They're gonna go home. Some of them may have too much to drink sometimes.
Yeah.
They may get in family disturbances, but they're human beings with
Sure.
human problems.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you can't change that. You can't legislate it out, and you just gotta hope to deal with it. The good thing about it is our system is such, when we identify something, whether we identify it our own or somebody brings it to us, like the video from Wellington, something's done right away.
Right.
We don't push it off to the side.
Right.
We don't say, okay, well, you know, we'll get to it when we get to it. Something's done right now. I can tell you within 20 minutes, the most, after I saw that video, that guy was off the road like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? That sends a strong message to everybody else. See, this is like if you got kids at home and one of them does something and you let them get by with it, then the rest of them go, oh, I can do this. See, everybody knew that guy got pulled off the road right away. So it's a clear message throughout the organization.
Sure.
You act inappropriately, there's consequences to what
Sure.
you do.
Sure.
Thank you for that moment of transparency. I
Sure.
appreciate that.
Sheriff, there's a lot of conversation now about dash cams.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about the dash cams in the law enforcement vehicles. When are they activated? Why are they activated? Give us a little bit of that.
We've actually had the dash cams for, I got to think it was probably a year or two after I got there, so it's got to be around 2005 or so. There was a spattering of them, but now like 970 vehicles have them,
Sure.
right? And they're good because anytime that the blue light is turned on, the camera automatically turns on.
So it's automatic?
Automatic.
The deputy doesn't have to flip a switch or
Nope,
anything?
it's all,
Gotcha.
it's connected. So
Gotcha.
once he turns on that light to stop somebody,
Okay.
then the lights are on. Plus he's got a microphone,
Okay.
right? So it's voice recorded. So it captures a lot. It captures chases, it captures interaction with traffic stops and what's going on up there. If we arrest the suspect and he's in the back seat, it actually has a two-way thing where he could hit a button and it'll videotape the suspect in the back if he's acting silly back there. It's a good tool, but it doesn't replace the body cams. And we actually, people will say, well, the sheriff was against body cams. I've never been against body cams, ever. So if somebody tells you that, they're not telling you the truth.
Okay.
The problem came in is the expense because we're so big. The part of the expense is we have to replace the servers, all right, in the agency. And the reason we have to replace the servers is they're just at capacity or almost beyond that now because we are the lead agency for Homeland Security for all of South Florida. So we run the Fusion Center, which is the intelligence gathering thing. And then we ran our real-time crime center. Plus it captures all of the cameras that you just talked about in the cars. Plus all of our IT, all of our computers, all of the in-car computers, everything in the organization. They're old, they're at capacity. I cannot put anything else on.
Okay.
So I have to start at the beginning replacing the servers. Once that happens, then the rest of it falls in place. Actually, the cameras themselves are only like $4,000 a piece. That's the cheapest part.
Sure.
So this whole thing is about $19 million. Now, we started talking about it probably 8, 9, 10 years ago. But during that conversation, we had the collapse in 2008. We've had other things happen. Now we got infrastructure problems where they're tearing the building down, trying to renovate it because it's literally falling apart. So the plan is, because there's some money in the sales tax, we kind of moved that money ahead of time, and we're going to be able to get the camera. So we've already started putting the team together to get the RFP and go out and get the companies to say, this is what we're going to offer you with the total package. Then we're going to have the personnel to monitor because you get public records requests. Somebody's got to look at the tape every day. We got to figure out what's evidence, what's not evidence. So you've probably got 10 people you got to hire just to do that. It's a huge package.
Sure.
Because
Well,
we're talking
you know,
3,000 cameras.
That's interesting that you say that. And, a county as rich as Palm Beach County and an agency such as the Sheriff's Office that has such a tremendous responsibility. The next question that people are going to be asking us is, how did we allow that system to get antiquated anyway?
Because every year you see the same thing. The sheriff's budget is so big.
Yes.
And when I explain to you about that in a couple minutes probably, you're going to go, well, yeah, it's big, but it's big because of X, Y, and Z. You got to remember, we're the 8th largest sheriff's office in the nation, and we handle 1.2 million calls for service,
Sure.
right? So, yeah, my budget really could be $1 billion
Sure.
if we didn't watch it.
Right.
It's like this time, the initial increase that we were going to send to the county was like 11%. I had to cut a lot of things out
Okay.
to get down to, I think it was like 4%, 4.3%, which they were happy with. But we bought a lot of stuff this time, and we're deferring a lot of stuff, right? We had a little bit of savings at the end of the year. I was able to replace one of the aircraft. I was able to do some other things with that I had to push it into next year. But just remember, I mean, when we have helicopters, we got airplanes, because nobody else does.
Right.
Every city in this county relies on us when they have a problem to send them a helicopter because they don't have their own. So we're servicing a lot of the cities, even though we don't contract with them. If Boca or Delray or Boynton Beach has a problem, they'll call us and say, would you send your bomb people down? Would you send your helicopter down? Can you send your dogs down?
So what do you propose to be the timeline as it relates to body cam?
I would say fully outfitted, everybody's got one, 36 months.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
And that's not bad.
No, that's not
And the
bad.
good thing about it is, if there's a good thing out of it waiting, is now we're into the latest generation of camera. The old cameras, I mean, they just took pictures of you and me talking. The next generation of cameras, which we're going to get into, has the availability to license plate readers like we have around the county. They can document evidence. They can be turned on instantly if like the deputy drew his gun, or if it's a really an important call, the dispatchers can turn it on. So there's a lot of things that the new generation cameras can do that the old ones could do. It's like a laptop. You buy a laptop today, next week Dell puts an ad out, there's a better one.
That's right, that's right.
Same with cameras.
Let's stay there with the budget. Because I know Westlake, we utilize the sheriff department, and I was one of those elected officials dealing with our manager like, we're not paying that. No, that's not gonna happen. And so we hear a lot about the sheriff budget.
Oh, yeah.
For full transparency, you know, people have issues with your agency's budget. And I was having a conversation with Tammy, and she was able to kind of give me some insight on that budget, and how it's appropriated and things of that nature. So we want you to really walk us through the budget, and then Tammy is going to allow you to explain, because another question is, with some of those dollars, how do you make a true impact in some of our black and brown communities with some of those dollars you make?
Yeah.
So Tammy, I'm gonna kind of let you go ahead and lead that
Certainly.
conversation
Certainly.
about the budget, but I do want to hear about the breakdown of it, and how do you feel as though your agency is making a true impact in our communities?
One thing that Vice Mayor was not aware of, and I had to explain to her that when COVID first started, there was a need to make certain that people in our community, the Glades community, had food, senior citizens. And the sheriff was one that stepped up, and he provided funding and support for us to start that hot meal feeding program. It has since morphed over into something bigger and better, which is the bulk food distribution program that we do every Friday, and we're distributing more than 100,000 pounds of food and produce and protein to people in the community. But tell us a little bit about that. You know, you're very much involved and engaged with the Urban League, and you're doing things with the Boys and Girls Club. Tell us a little bit about what your budget does, and then those other dollars that you use to put into the community to address some of those societal ills.
Well, fortunately for us, our law enforcement trust funds, that's the money I take away from the bad guys, and I have the discretion to use it. I try to use those funds versus taxpayers' dollars to do all the things that you're talking about. Because the budget's very tight, even though we have a certain segment of it that's for community issues and community events, that segment will never reach where it needs to reach. So I try to put back into the programs that you're talking about, Boys and Girls Clubs, the Urban League for jobs right there. We send a whole bunch of people to the Black on Black crime ventures, food programs. We're gonna have different programs where we're going to, some ministries, we're gonna give them $10,000 to feed people at Thanksgiving, 2 separate groups. So we're able to do that. I think every 4 months, 5 months, I sign a system to put out between $600,000 and $700,000 through law enforcement trust funds to the various groups that are out there. A lot of kids programs to keep the kids off the streets, but then again, a lot of the programs to feed the homeless, the homeless coalition, those type of things. So I use that to supplement that I can't get out of the budget. All right, so we're very fortunate that we're able to do that. And since I've been the sheriff, it's been about $10 million. Right, that's why when you hear about defunding the police and take money out of their budget to do all those things, we don't have to defund me in any way because I'm already doing it. All right, so that helps on that end. So the budget is huge. It really is. It could be $1 billion very easily.
Wow.
It's about 700. I think it'll be about 785 million this time.
Okay.
But the disingenuous part and not so much anymore. Virginia Baker has been really, really fantastic to work with. The budget is broken down into law enforcement, corrections, the judiciary, which is the judges and corrections, and the courthouse.
Okay.
By state statute, the courthouse and the crime lab and the school crossing guards and the jail is the responsibility of the county. not the sheriff. There's a lot of places in the state where the sheriff does not run the jail, the county does.
Right.
Because the state statute says it's the responsibility of the county,
Okay.
not the sheriff. Prior sheriffs, through the agreement with the county commission says, would you run these programs? We'll put it in your budget, but we'll fund it.
Sure.
So they said, okay, because it's easier for us to run corrections and these other programs. So pretty close to $240 million of my budget are those programs. So if you took those out of my budget and gave them back to the county, my budget is way down.
Wow.
So when you hear people say, well, geez, the sheriff budget's out of control, it's so much portion of the county, that's not really the truth. If you took their portion out and just left me with my own.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
explanation.
So that's a big chunk.
Sure.
Now, there's 81% of my budget's personnel. 81%. That's by contract. That means the salary schedule is there, their compensation schedule is there, their pension is there, their health insurance is there. 81%. That's static. You're not going to change that.
Right.
The other percentage of it, I have contracts like the jail. I have to have health care for the inmates, especially during this COVID thing.
Sure.
That's going to go up.
Okay.
I have to feed them. That's going to go up because now there's a different way they have to prepare the food.
right.
Right?
That's right.
So there's some contractual things that you just can't say, well, I'm not going to do that anymore because I got to take care of the health care and I got to feed them. Right? So there's certain things that are in that budget. They're not frills. They're not frivolous.
Sure.
There's a certain amount of gas you got to put in the cars. And we're the largest county east of the Mississippi in the United States land-wise. I mean, you drive back and forth a whole bunch, you're burning up millions of gallons of gas. So there's a lot of things that are in this budget that are what I call uncontrollable costs that you just can't say, well, I'm just going to cut them out of here tomorrow.
Sure.
Because you can't operate.
Sure.
You cannot operate. But when you hear that the sheriff's budget is so big and it's 50% of the county's budget, that's not necessarily the truth.
Okay.
Because contained within my budget is stuff that you gave me, that it's your responsibility,
Sure.
and I agreed to do it.
You agree.
Sure.
So we do very good at keeping the budget low where we need it to be, and ask for what we need. There's a difference between, it's like your own budget at home. You got what you want
Gotcha.
and what you need.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? There's
Right.
a lot we want,
Right.
but we can't get it right now.
Sure.
So we ask for what we need because I have to sign something by law under oath that says this is what it takes to operate the sheriff's office to the best of my knowledge and good faith.
Okay.
Because if they don't give me my budget, then I'm going to go to the governor. I'm going to say this is what I need to protect the citizens of the county. And I swear to that under oath that this is what it is.
I'm glad you responded to that because I consider myself to be pretty astute and I didn't know all of those intricate details that you explained. So thank you so much for that.
And you hear, I'm not going to bring politics in, but you hear at election time, whoever's running against you say, I'll cut that budget and all of that.
Yeah.
They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
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 It's easy to say.
Yeah.
Now moving on, social media.
Yeah.
Social media means a lot to a lot of people nowadays.
Yep.
So much so that everybody's doing stuff with their phones, taking pictures, taking video. Tell me, how has that impeded or assisted and helped law enforcement in any way? Do you think that that's been a big issue of concern? You're not able to do the job that you need to do because everybody has cameras now. Let's talk about what that looks like and feels like for law enforcement.
I don't think it's a hindrance as much as it is something that, like we talked about earlier, that the men and women that are out here have to understand that the level of scrutiny that they're under right now is more than it ever has been.
Okay.
Right? So it hasn't been a hindrance. That's mine. I'm just going.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It hasn't been a hindrance, but it's been something you have to deal with. Now, on the other side of that, it's an advantage to the agency because, like today, we're videotaping this.
Sure.
We're not going to rely on the news media to get a good story out because more times than not, the news media is not going to put out great stories. They're going to put out stories that are controversial
Sure.
and bad things seem to lead.
Sure.
So the social media has been good for us in that respect because we can get out a lot of stories that we couldn't get out before,
Sure.
right? And it's a good way to connect with people. The reality of it is that there's a segment of our society right now, the younger section, that's what they do, right? I mean, literally, you could be at the dinner table and there's this
Yeah.
one kid over there and he's on
Yeah.
sending a message to the person at the other side of the dinner table. you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So, it's something that we had to embrace, we have to deal with. The way I look at it is, we shouldn't care if there's 75 people out here taking a picture of what we're doing.
Okay,
It shouldn't matter to us,
okay.
because we should be doing what is the right thing to do
Absolutely.
and the right way to do it,
Absolutely.
right? So whether we got one person or a whole crowd taking pictures of us, shouldn't matter in the slightest
Right.
about how we're gonna do business.
Right.
Because we should be doing it the right way.
Sure. Because, we're seeing a lot of things going viral.
Oh,
now.
yeah.
So I didn't know if that was helping you or hurting you.
It depends,
as
it
relates to
depends
law
on how it
enforcement.
gets portrayed. Usually what you see is you never see the whole thing from beginning to end.
Sure.
Usually something starts happening and it gets to a certain point, everybody starts piling up and then somebody in the crowd starts taking a picture.
Sure.
So you get the last 15 seconds of something that may be transpiring for 2 or 3 minutes. And usually that last 15 seconds is the
Right.
culmination of everything. You see the deputy and somebody else may be fighting and they're on the ground, they got a scuffle with them, they get a handcuff on them. You don't know what led up to that,
Right,
right?
right,
And everything is not always what it's portrayed to be in the last 15 seconds.
right, right, right.
So that's the downside. It's like body cameras. They're not the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Because, right now I can see 2 or 3 people out of the side of my
Right.
eye right over
Right.
here right now.
Right.
Right? Now the camera can't because it's
Yeah.
focused like
Right.
this. But I can see right now if the guy that's sitting in that chair over there reaches in and pulls out a gun, and then I turn to do something, that camera didn't see that. All the
Right.
camera's gonna see is me turning,
Sure.
and then something's gonna happen. Right? So it's a very one-dimensional thing. The camera cannot sense, it cannot perceive something. It's like when I'm dealing with somebody on the street, if I see them and they start tensing up their hands, they start making a fist,
Sure.
they start taking a little bit of a stance, or camera can't sense all of that.
Right.
All right, so it's a very one-dimensional thing. In fact, the Supreme Court of the United States, in several cases, has said that video evidence in itself is not the sole determining factor because they realize that that cannot sense
Absolutely.
everything.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Right. So, Sheriff,
Uh-huh.
with that being said, you and I was on a panel together maybe a couple of months ago now
Yeah.
with CJC, and 8 Can't Wait came up. And I know when we were, I had the opportunity to work with the Black elected officials. I'm on that board, and we had some language in there about 8 Can't Wait, and you had already implemented it, maybe
Right.
5 years ago, I think,
Yeah.
correct?
At least.
At least. Walk us through, and I know you have it in action now, but walk us through what is the ongoing de-escalation trainings for the sheriff department?
That's
If
something, our training is segmented into mandatory training that the FDLE, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, you have to have so many hours of so many different things. But our training section over there, when it comes to use of force, that's part of what the training segment is use of force is de-escalation.
Sure.
Right? Now, in some of the 8 Can't Wait things, they talked about a use of force continuum. That's kind of old. It's kind of maybe 5, 6, 7 years old. The most recent thing is situational de-escalation. And
Okay.
the difference is this. Under the old system of the continuum, it said if you come up with somebody and they have a knife, you draw your gun. Right? Well, that's kind of like force meets force.
Sure.
Under the new system of situational de-escalation, if I encounter somebody with a knife, I'm going to do different things. I'm not automatically going to draw my gun. I'm going to put some distance between myself. I'm going to tell you to put down the knife. I'm going to talk to you a little bit. I'm going to try to figure out why you're doing what you're doing, which gives me more time to get some more people there. Right? So it's situational. That is ongoing, and it's working, and I'll tell you why. Week ago, Walmart, Belvedere, and 441. We got a call of a shoplifter. The deputy gets there. He's waiting just outside the door. You know how you come through and you just got to show your little receipt. The individual walked out, about a 25, 26-year-old young African-American guy. He sees the deputy, first thing he does is pulls out a knife, right? Takes a fighting stance. So the deputy did the right thing with his training, backed up a little bit, right? Says, hey, you know, what's going on? Put down the knife. We don't need to do this. It's just shoplifted. In the meantime, more people are getting there. Lonnie takes out his taser, which is less than lethal, right? That's what we got him for. Tells the guy, look, you know, put the knife down. I don't want to have to tase you. You know, this isn't worth it. You know, just engaging him, giving him some space between himself. Some other deputies got there, and at the right time, hit him with the taser. Guy goes down. Deputies go over, take the knife away from him. He's not hurt. We're not hurt. And everybody goes about their business. He goes to jail. Different than what you saw at the other place where the guy supposedly had a knife and the deputy pulls out his gun, they're following him, he gets to the car, and it goes real bad.
Sure.
That's a bad training thing.
Right.
If you look at that thing from beginning to end, bad training.
Repeat that. Repeat what you just said. Bad. I want people watching
It's
to know
bad,
that you felt
it's
like
bad
it was a
training.
bad. Okay,
and,
good.
And bad. And what happened was at the end of that thing, something went bad.
That's right.
It did not have to happen.
That's right.
The difference, here's the difference. What we did at Walmart with good training and what happened up there with bad training.
Good.
More times than not, when you get to situations like what happened with George Floyd, where you got somebody with their D on their neck, that's bad training. You don't train like that.
I agree.
You know? First of all, to put your knee on somebody's neck is not even the right place to control them. If we put our knee on somebody, it'll be in the middle of their back while we get them handcuffed, because the middle of your back is where we can control you, right? So it goes back to your training.
Right.
You're going to do in real life what you're trained to do all the time. And our training has been outstanding. You know, 10 years ago, that wouldn't have gone like that.
Right.
You know, something bad would have happened because the deputy probably would have drawn his gun right away. There's a lot of things that tell you that a guy 20 feet away from you can run over and stab you before you can even get your gun out.
Sure,
Right?
sure.
That's gone by the wayside. So it's situational. You don't want to just jump to the next level, which that continuum had you do sometimes. So our training is excellent on that, and that's living proof of it right there.
Staying with that for a second, I want to just stay right there for a few minutes, and I know we're getting ready to wrap up, but how do you build, I like that you said, you know, bad training with the George Floyd, with Jacob Blake, I believe his last name. How do we begin? How do we begin building trust? Because there's a trust factor within the Black and brown communities with policing.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
How do we begin building trust, Sheriff?
The first thing is don't make other people's problems your own.
Okay.
That's one of the things that I tried to get across when we were at that thing. We cannot let what happened in northern cities that got bad training and bad issues become our problems. And we saw that in Belgrade. When all these protests were happening, you know, there were some radical groups that want to go out to Belgrade, stir it up, and fortunately the ministers out there and the elected officials said, look, we don't need this. We don't have that problem. Right? So we can't make other people's problems our problems.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Now, we have to keep the dialogue going.
Okay.
We have to have responsible people like yourselves get the right information and get it out, right? And not listen to people that just want to spew stuff out that have no idea what they're talking about. And you have to have standardization. One of the good things in this county is the Criminal Justice Commission and the Law Enforcement Planning Council that tries to standardize training methods and policies and procedures throughout the police departments in the county. And for the most part, I think we do pretty good.
Okay.
So the only way to build it up is through your actions, right? The unfortunate side of it is you can do 20 good things and then one little mistake, everybody goes, well, look at that, and they forget about the 20 good things. You're never going to overcome that. I don't care how much you do.
Right.
Somebody's going to always look and say, that's the way they all are. Look, you know there's 800,000 police officers in the nation. 800,000.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Wow.
So
That's a lot.
we've had, what, 5 incidences of things that have gone bad out of 800,000.
Wow.
So people can't paint the entire 800,000 and say, because of these incidents that happened in other places. But I would submit to you that in these places where they've had these really bad things going on,
Sure.
it wasn't that one thing.
Right.
It's been building up for years.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Agreed.
There's been things happening in the communities that weren't right, and they just haven't had that relationship.
Absolutely.
One of the things that I really brought home to me that we have a good, but can get better relationship in our communities is when the COVID thing hit. You know, the deputies were in there, they were getting people to the testing sites. They were getting people food in the neighborhoods.
I agree.
They were getting people food to the hospitals and the first responders. And there was a lot of good interaction of trust of people that were there. Doesn't mean it's the best it can be, because we can always get better, but it showed me that there is a level of trust there.
Right.
There's a level of communication. And the more we do by, you know, we allow our commanders in these different districts to choose the people that go in there, and they've done a good job of choosing the right people to go into the right areas, to be able to interact.
Sure.
So the more we do that, the more we have what we started regional advisory boards with citizens. In fact, Colonel Rajo runs those boards now, and we're going to make those a little more inclusive.
Okay.
I would like to be able to spend more time going to some meetings myself. The problem is, there's no way, I don't have enough hours in a day to go to all the meetings people want me to go to.
Understood.
That's why something like this is important, that we can videotape and get it out. It's just a physical impossibility for me to do it. That's why I like the commanders,
Sure.
because at the end of the day, you can meet with me all day long. Then I got to tell somebody else who's got to tell somebody else. I like the fact that the commanders in those areas go to those meetings, and they're the ones that make it happen.
Yep. Yep.
Right? They're the ones that actually, where the rubber meets the road, they make it happen. So if they're in those meetings and the people are actually back and forth and talking to them and say, this is what we like, this is what we don't like, then they can go do something right away, because they have the latitude to go do that.
Sure.
They don't have to ask me to do something
Sure.
Right.
in their places.
Sure.
So those are very important board meetings that we have. Again, this county's so big. It's just, people don't realize the enormity of this county, and as big as it's spread out as it is. We have 17 districts now. Yeah, and they're very busy.
Sure.
So this is a good conversation to have, and
It is.
videotape it and get it out.
And as we prepare to wrap up, Vice Mayor, one of the things that we want to talk about really, really briefly, or as detailed as you like, we hear so many people beating up law enforcement and talking about stuff that they probably don't know what they're talking about. What is it that the Black and brown community can do to support sheriff's efforts and the law enforcement personnel that are out there, boots on the ground every day, to make certain that if Tammy calls, I need them to be to my house in 1.5 seconds? What can we do to support or assist you in being that pristine agency that provides law enforcement to our community throughout the county?
Well, the good thing about it is that the men and women that work out here are going to be there just as fast as they can get there, no matter what anybody says. I've been really proud of them. You know, they've been doing their job and getting out of the cars and taking care of business, regardless of what the sentiment has been. I would say the biggest thing is to have people just don't jump to conclusions, right? Let things play out. You know, when something happens, or you see one of these videos on YouTube, or something happens out here, don't automatically assume that it is what it appears to be at the beginning. Get all the information. Let the system work. I tell people all the time, when you get stopped in a traffic stop and you're not happy with it, you can't arbitrate that on the side of the road.
Sure.
That's why we have courts and we have judges, right? I'm a big person about comply then complain. We have a very good complaint system that if somebody makes a complaint, it's going to be investigated all the way down the road. So do whatever you have to do to get by the situation at the time, then make a complaint and see where it goes. But my biggest thing is, you know, let's not jump to conclusions. Let's realize we're all human beings, we're all in this together, and we want to have a good community, we want to have the best lives we can have. The vast majority of the people that are out here are working towards that goal to make your community as safe as it is. And if we have a problem, we're going to deal with it. Have confidence in the fact it will be dealt with. And we're not going to turn our back on it. But don't jump too quick.
Absolutely.
You know? That's the best thing. And have these type of conversations. Go to these regional advisory boards. Show up at, you know, when we have something, ask the questions. You know, there's not a single person on my staff that will dodge a question. Anytime. You know, it's like I told you at the beginning. You may not like my answer,
Absolutely.
but I will give you the most honest answer I can give you, and then maybe we need to work on that answer to make it to where it's a little more palatable for you,
Okay.
but at least you'll get an answer.
Okay. And I like that you said at least you're open and willing
That's it.
to adjusting and being open to listen and hear and digest and move forward together.
Yep.
Well, I do appreciate this conversation.
I do.
Sheriff, I would love to charge you. Maybe we could do this quarterly. Have these conversations quarterly so we could try to get some information out to people, because I understood you can't get to every meeting. I know I'm busy, Tammy, you're busy, all of us.
And the thing about it is that we don't have to wait till quarterly. If something comes up, and hopefully it's not going
That's
to,
right.
but if something does,
That's right.
then let's not put too much space
Sure.
in between us. Let's
Okay.
get together and say,
Okay.
hey, this is what happened.
All right.
What's being done about it? What do we
Okay.
need to do? What are the facts about it? And if we can talk about it, if it's not one of those deals that's a very serious crime or something,
Sure.
then we just get the information out. Because the more real facts we
That's
get out,
right.
not what's portrayed on the news media, but
That's
real
right.
facts,
That's right.
right? And people like yourselves that people will listen to
Mm-hmm.
have the facts, and you're armed with that, makes a big difference.
Okay. Well,
Thanks.
thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate
Okay,
it.
thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Appreciate it, okay.